At 6:12 a.m., the city was already awake, but it hadn't decided what kind of day it would be yet. Daniel Kovac stood in his kitchen in socks that didn't match, watching the kettle tremble on the stove. The apartment smelled faintly of old coffee and lemon detergent. Outside the window, the eastern sky over the river was the color of bruised peaches, half-light pressing itself between buildings. He checked his phone. No new messages. That was fine. It was better, actually. Silence meant nothing had gone wrong yet. Daniel poured water into a chipped mug with a logo from a tech conference that no longer existed. He'd gotten it 3 jobs ago, back when people still believed conferences change things. He leaned against the counter, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic waking up, someone arguing on a balcony 2 floors below. Today was supposed to be simple. He had a meeting at 9:30, a deadline at noon, and dinner planned with his sister in the evening. Normal. Safe. Predictable. The kind of day you didn't remember afterward. Daniel liked those days. He learned, over time, that days which started with too much promise usually collected disaster by lunchtime. The kettle clicked off. He poured the water, added instant coffee, and stirred slowly. As he did, his eyes drifted to the envelope on the table. White, official, unopened. It had arrived yesterday evening, slipped halfway under the door like it was embarrassed to be there. He hadn't touched it. He knew who it was from. He didn't need to open it to know that. Not today, he muttered, and pushed the envelope beneath a stack of old mail. He dressed quickly, jeans, dark jacket, backpack, and left the apartment at 6:47, locking the door twice out of habit. The hallway smelled like damp concrete, and someone's forgotten dinner. The elevator was broken again, so he took the stairs, descending past doors he'd never knocked on, lives he'd never seen. By the time he reached the street, the city had fully committed to being alive. Buses hissed. A cyclist cursed at a delivery van. Somewhere, a siren rose and fell, already distant. Daniel joined the flow. The subway station swallowed him whole. He tapped his card, descended into the underground heat, and stood on the platform with 100 other strangers who shared the same expression. Half alert, half elsewhere. Ads blinked overhead. Insurance, phones, political promises already out of date. He took his usual spot near the third pillar from the left. Across the tracks, a woman in a red coat paced while talking into her phone, her voice tight with urgency. A teenager sat on the floor, earbuds in, nodding to music no one else could hear. An old man stared at the tunnel like he expected it to answer him. Daniel checked his phone again. Still nothing. The train roared in, wind whipping hair and coats, and everyone stepped forward as one organism pretending to be many individuals. Inside the car, Daniel found a pole and wrapped his hand around it, his knuckles whitening as the train lurched forward. At the next stop, more people pushed in. At the stop after that, even more. At 7:21, the train stalled. At first, no one reacted. This happened all the time. A brief delay, a signal issue. Life paused and resumed without explanation. Then a voice crackled over the intercom. Attention passengers. We are experiencing a temporary stop due to an issue ahead on the line. Please remain calm. Remain calm. Daniel exhaled slowly. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Phones came out. People shifted. Someone sighed loudly, as if volume might fix infrastructure. Another announcement followed, less confident than the first. We appreciate your patience. At 7:38, the lights flickered. That got everyone's attention. The car dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. A murmur spread like a low tide of unease. Is this normal? Someone asked. Probably, someone else answered, without conviction. Daniel felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Not panic exactly, but awareness. The sense that the invisible machinery of the day had just slipped a gear. Then the train jolted. Hard. Not enough to throw anyone, but enough to snap heads up and silence conversations. The lights went out completely this time. Darkness pressed in. A child cried. A woman swore softly. Someone laughed nervously. The intercom stayed silent. Daniel gripped the pole, feeling the vibration of the train settle into stillness. In the dark, his phone buzzed. Finally, he pulled out, the screen casting a pale glow over his face. The message was from an unknown number. Are you in the metro right now? Daniel frowned. Before he could respond, another message arrived. This is important. Please answer. His heartbeat picked up. He typed back. Who is this? The reply came instantly. My name is Mira. I'm with the City Emergency Response Unit. You're on Train 6, Car 3. Correct? Daniel swallowed. Yes. How do you know that? There was a pause this time, long enough for the darkness to feel heavier. Then, because something has gone very wrong, and you're closer to it than anyone else. The train shuddered again, deep in its metal bones, like something beneath the city had shifted in its sleep. Daniel stared at the message, his coffee-stained mug, his unopened envelope, his ordinary morning all suddenly very far away. Above ground, the city continued to breathe, unaware that one of its arteries had just been pinched. And the day, finally, had decided what kind of day it was going to be. The darkness lasted longer than Daniel expected. At first, people treated it like a power outage, temporary, inconvenient, survivable. Phone screens lit up the car in scattered patches of white and blue. Faces hovered half-illuminated, floating in the gloom like unfinished thoughts. Someone cracked a joke about free horror rides. No one laughed. Daniel typed carefully. What went wrong? The reply came with a delay this time. 15 seconds. Long enough for him to imagine 100 answers. We lost communication with a maintenance crew working near your section of the tunnel. At the same time, our sensors picked up structural stress where your train stopped. Daniel read it twice. Structural stress? Yes. There's a possibility of a partial collapse. The word collapse landed heavily, like a dropped tool echoing down a shaft. Around him, the air felt thicker, warmer. Someone nearby began fanning themselves with a folded newspaper. The child who'd cried earlier had gone quiet, which was worse. A man's voice cut through the darkness. Hey, does anyone know what's happening? A few people answered at once. Guesses, rumors, nothing solid. The absence of authority pressed in as much as the darkness. Daniel typed again. Why are you telling me this? The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Because the section of tunnel ahead of you is not accessible from our side, and because you're standing near the emergency access panel in Car 3. Daniel looked down. He hadn't noticed it before, a small metal hatch near the door, marked with faded yellow paint. An emergency release handle, half hidden behind an ad for language learning software. I don't know how to use that, he wrote. You don't need to yet, Mira replied. But you may have to. At 7:52 a.m., the train shuddered again, this time softer, but accompanied by a distant sound that made the hair on Daniel's arms rise. A groan, not from the passengers, from the tunnel itself. It was low and drawn out, like metal rubbing against stone, or something under pressure slowly giving way. A woman near the door whispered, Did you hear that? Yes, Daniel said before he could stop himself. Several heads turned toward him. He hated that, being noticed, being the center of anything. His phone buzzed again. We need eyes inside the car, Mira wrote. The cameras went down when the power cut. Daniel hesitated. What do you want me to do? There was no immediate answer. In the silence, someone pounded on the door, separating the car from the next one. Hello? Can anyone hear us? The sound echoed, thin and desperate. Daniel thought of the envelope waiting on his kitchen table. Thought of his sister, probably already planning what she'd complain about over dinner. Thought of how badly he'd wanted this day to be forgettable. His phone buzzed. I need you to stay calm and follow instructions. Can you tell me how many people are in your car? He looked around, counting shapes and shadows. About 40, he said aloud, then typed it. Any injuries? Is anyone hurt? Daniel asked. A chorus of no's, with one uncertain maybe. A man had bumped his elbow. Another woman said she felt dizzy. Daniel relayed it all. Good, Mira replied. For now, we need to keep people where they are. Movement could worsen the stress on the tunnel. Almost on cue, someone shouted, We should force the doors. Another voice agreed. They can't keep us down here. A ripple of agitation moved through the car. Daniel felt his throat tighten. People are getting nervous, he typed. They're talking about breaking out. There was a longer pause this time. That would be dangerous. If they opened the doors without clearance, they could expose themselves to live rails or unstable ground. Daniel looked at the door, at the thin seams separating them from the unknown darkness outside. "Everyone," he said, louder than he meant to. "They told us to stay put. It's safer." A man near the center scoffed. "Who told you?" Daniel hesitated. Saying city emergency response sounded absurd, like claiming to be in a movie. "Control," he said finally. "I'm talking to Control." A lie, technically, but not entirely. The man studied him, then looked away. The tension didn't vanish, but it shifted, like a weight redistributing. Daniel's phone buzzed again. "Thank you for that. You may need to speak up again." He stared at the screen. "Why me?" The answer came slower this time. More human. "Because you're listening. And because sometimes that's enough." Another sound rolled through the tunnel. This one sharper, like a crack snapping open somewhere far ahead. The lights flickered on briefly, revealing pale faces, wide eyes, then vanished again. Someone screamed. Daniel felt his pulse in his ears. "Mira," he typed, his fingers shaking. "How bad is it?" The reply took longer than any before. "If we don't stabilize the tunnel within the next 30 minutes, we may have to evacuate through your car. And there's a chance we won't have time to do it safely." 30 minutes. Daniel leaned back against the wall, the cold metal grounding him. Above them, thousands of people walked, drove, argued, laughed, completely unaware that 40 strangers were sitting in the dark beneath their feet, counting minutes like coins. And somewhere ahead in the tunnel, something ancient and heavy was deciding whether to stay in place or fall. Time behaved strangely underground. Each minute felt swollen, stretched thin, then snapped back on itself. Daniel checked the clock on his phone. 8:03 a.m. And tried not to imagine the city above, still running on schedule, meetings beginning, coffee cooling, unaware of the pocket of fear trapped below. The air was getting warmer. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. Enough for people to loosen scarves, shrug out of coats. The smell of sweat mixed with metal and oil. Someone near the door was breathing too fast. Daniel typed, "What happens if we have to evacuate?" The response came in fragments, as if Mira were doing 3 things at once. "We would cut power to the rails. Maintenance staff would approach from the rear tunnel. Passengers would be guided on foot to the nearest station." Daniel imagined it, walking in a dark tunnel, uneven ground, cables snaking along the walls. He imagined someone tripping, panicking, and if the tunnel collapses while we're walking, the dots appeared, stopped, appeared again. That is the risk we're trying to avoid. The honesty was worse than reassurance. A man pushed his way forward, phone, flashlight on. "Hey," he said, pointing at Daniel. "You said you're talking to Control. Ask them how long this is going to take." Several people turned toward him, hopeful and afraid. Daniel nodded and typed. "They want a timeline." The reply was immediate. "Tell them we are assessing the situation. Do not give a specific time." Daniel swallowed. "They're assessing," he said. "I know it's frustrating, but they need us to stay still." A woman in a red scarf laughed bitterly. "That's it? That's all you've got?" Before Daniel could answer, the train lurched again, harder than before. The floor tilted slightly to the left. People cried out. Someone fell. A phone clattered across the floor, skidding until it hit Daniel's shoe. Then came a sound. A deep, violent crack, like thunder locked in a box. Dust fell from the ceiling in a fine gray mist. It coated hair, shoulders, eyelashes. The child began to scream again, this time without pause. Daniel's phone buzzed furiously. "We've lost another support reading. The stress is increasing faster than expected." Daniel's hands were shaking now. "What do you need me to do?" The answer came after a heartbeat. "We may need to initiate a controlled evacuation through your car. That means opening the emergency access panel and preparing people to move." Daniel looked at the small metal hatch again. "I've never done this. Neither has anyone else in that car. But you are calm. That matters." Daniel almost laughed. Calm was not the word he would have chosen for the storm inside his chest. "If we do this," he typed, "people could panic." "Yes. And if we don't, the risk increases with every minute." Another crack echoed through the tunnel, closer this time. Daniel felt something shift, not just in the train, but in himself. The quiet instinct to stay invisible, to let someone else take charge, loosened its grip. He stood. "Listen to me," he said, louder than before. Conversations died mid-sentence. Faces turned toward him, lit by phone screens, fear making everyone younger. "There's a problem with the tunnel ahead," Daniel said carefully. "They're working on it, but we may need to evacuate through this car if things get worse." A man near the door swore. Someone else said, "Evacuate where?" "Into the tunnel," Daniel answered. "With guidance. Safely." The word safely wobbled in the air. A woman holding the child asked, "Is it going to collapse?" Daniel met her eyes. "I don't know," he said, "but staying calm gives us the best chance." That honesty again did something. Not comfort, but trust. His phone buzzed. "You did well. Can you open the panel?" "Not fully. Just check the mechanism." Daniel knelt by the hatch. His fingers traced the cold metal, found the handle. He pulled gently. It resisted, then gave way with a dull click. A breath of colder air slipped through the seam, carrying the scent of earth and rust. Daniel closed it again. "It opens," he typed. "What's next?" Before the reply came, something new happened. The lights flickered on, not weak this time, but fully, flooding the car with harsh white brightness. People shielded their eyes. The sudden clarity revealed fear etched plainly on faces, dust streaking cheeks like war paint. Then the intercom crackled to life. Not the automated voice, a human one. "Passengers on train 6, it said, strained but steady. "This is emergency services. We are aware of your situation. Please listen carefully." A collective exhale swept through the car. Daniel felt his knees go weak. The voice continued. "We are preparing a response. Do not attempt to exit the train unless instructed." Daniel's phone buzzed again, almost lost in the noise. "That's us," Mira wrote. "But we have a problem." "What kind?" The pause stretched. "The maintenance crew we lost contact with. They were working in the tunnel ahead of you. And we just received a partial signal." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Are they alive?" The reply came in two parts. "We don't know. But if they are, they may be trapped between your train and the unstable section." Daniel closed his eyes. Above them, the city rushed on, ignorant and indifferent. Below it, two groups of people waited in the dark, connected by chance, steel, and the slow, grinding weight of the earth. And Daniel realized with sudden clarity that this day would not end without asking something of him he had never planned to give. At 8:17 a.m., the city's emergency command center finally acknowledged what it had been trying not to say out loud. Mira stared at the wall of screens, jaw tight, headset pressed hard against her ear. One feed showed a simplified map of the metro system, red lines pulsing where stress readings spiked. Another displayed live social media, photos of stalled trains, complaints, jokes that hadn't yet realized how close they were to becoming something else. And in the center, train 6. Car 3. "Daniel." "Repeat that," she said into the mic. "You're saying the crew may be between the collapse point and the train?" The reply came distorted, but clear enough. "Yes. If they move forward after losing contact, they're likely sheltering in a service alcove approximately 70 meters ahead of the train." 70 meters. Too far to reach safely if the tunnel gave way. Mira closed her eyes for half a second. "Okay," she said. "We have to assume they're alive." She switched channels. "Daniel," she said, her voice entering his ear, not as text this time, but as sound. He flinched at the sudden intimacy. "Yes," he answered, his voice hoarse. "You're going to hear some things you won't like," Mira said. "But I need you to listen carefully." The car had gone quiet. People were watching him now openly, reading the seriousness in his posture, the tension in his shoulders. "Okay," Daniel said. "There are two options," Mira continued. "Option 1. We begin immediate evacuation of passengers through your car, moving them back toward the last stable station." Daniel nodded slowly, though she couldn't see him. "Option 2. We delay evacuation and attempt to reach the maintenance crew first. That means sending a small group forward through the emergency panel to locate them and assess the damage from the inside." A murmur rippled through the car. Someone shouted, "Forward? Are you insane?" Daniel raised a hand instinctively, asking for silence. "What's the risk?" he asked. A pause. "If the tunnel collapses while people are moving forward, Mira said carefully. They would be closest to the failure point. Daniel closed his eyes. And if we evacuate now, then we likely lose the crew. The word lose hung between them. Daniel looked around the car. 40 people. Office workers. Students. A mother with a child. A man whose elbow hurt. People who had not agreed to become part of a decision like this. And somewhere ahead, in the dark, possibly 3 or 4 workers who had gone underground that morning expecting nothing more dramatic than routine maintenance. Why are you asking me? Daniel said quietly. Mira didn't pretend. Because you are there, she said. Because you have access. And because you have already earned their trust. Daniel felt the weight of that settle onto him like another layer of concrete. A woman near the door spoke up. What's happening? Daniel inhaled. There are workers ahead of us, he said. They might be trapped. A heavy silence followed. The man who'd scoffed earlier swore under his breath. The woman with the child pulled him closer. Are you saying we have to risk our lives for them? Someone asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He thought of the envelope again. Of the letter he hadn't opened because he already knew its contents. A formal notice, final confirmation that his appeal had been denied. That the bridge collapse 3 years ago, another morning, another ordinary day, had not been his fault legally, but not entirely forgiven either. He had been there then, too. He had chosen caution. People had died anyway. Listen, Daniel said, his voice steady in a way he didn't quite recognize as his own. No one is being forced to do anything. If we move forward, it would be a small group. Volunteers. A bitter laugh. Volunteers for what? To get buried alive. To help people who may not get another chance, Daniel said. The word surprised him as much as anyone else. His phone buzzed. We need your answer, Daniel. The stress curve is rising. Daniel looked at the emergency panel, looked at the faces around him. Then something unexpected happened. A man in his 50s, wearing a construction jacket with reflective strips, stepped forward. I'll go, he said. Heads turned. I worked underground for 20 years, the man continued. I know tunnels. I know when they're about to fail. A younger woman followed. I'm a nurse, she said. If they're hurt. A pause. Then another voice. I can help too. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Myra's voice was quiet now. If you do this, you need a leader. Daniel exhaled. I'll go, he said. The words were out before fear could pull them back. A woman grabbed his sleeve. You don't have to. Yes, he said gently. I do. He knelt again by the panel. Okay, he said into the phone. Tell me exactly what to do. Above ground, emergency crews rerouted traffic. News alerts flickered onto screens. Helicopters lifted into the air. The city was starting to notice. And beneath it, a small group prepared to walk into the dark. Not because they were brave, but because the alternative felt worse. The emergency panel opened with a sound like a held breath finally released. Cold air rushed in, damp and metallic, carrying the deep underground smell of wet stone and old electricity. Beyond the door, the tunnel stretched forward into darkness, the rails disappearing into a black curve that swallowed light. Daniel stood at the threshold, his phone flashlight cutting a narrow path ahead. Power to the rails is off, Mira said in his ear. You're clear to step down. Move slowly. Stay close to the wall. The construction worker, his name was Pavel, climbed down first, testing the ground with his boot. Solid, Pavel said. For now. The nurse, Lila, followed. Then Daniel. Behind them, the train car was silent. People watched as if they were witnessing a separation, an unspoken understanding that things would not be the same when, if, they returned. Daniel's feet hit the gravel bed. The ground vibrated faintly beneath him, a reminder that the city above never fully stopped moving. How far? Daniel whispered. 70 meters, Mira replied. You'll see a maintenance alcove on the right. They moved forward in a tight line, lights low. The tunnel walls were streaked with moisture, cables pinned like veins along the concrete. Every few steps, dust trickled down, whispering as it fell. Pavel paused, pressed a hand to the wall. She's under strain, he murmured. Concrete's talking. Daniel didn't ask what it was saying. A sound echoed ahead. Not the tunnel. A voice. Daniel froze. Did you hear that? Yes, Lila said. Someone's there. They moved faster now, fear sharpening their focus. The alcove emerged from the darkness, a recessed pocket carved into the tunnel wall, partially blocked by fallen debris. A flashlight beam flickered from inside. "Hello," Daniel called. "Emergency response." A cough answered him, then a weak voice. We thought the train had gone." 3 men huddled inside the alcove, dust-coated and wide-eyed. One had blood matting his hair. Another clutched his leg at an unnatural angle. Lila was already kneeling. "I'm a nurse," she said. "Don't move unless I tell you to." Daniel spoke into his phone. "Mira, we found them. 3. 1 head injury, 1 possible fracture." Relief crackled through the line. "Thank God." "Okay. New problem." Daniel swallowed. "There's always a new problem." "The stress readings just spiked again," Mira said. "We believe the collapse point is now between your location and the train." Daniel looked back down the tunnel. The darkness felt closer. "So we're cut off," Pavel said quietly. "Yes," Mira confirmed. "The train is no longer the safest place." Lila looked up. "Then where do we go?" Mira hesitated. "There's a vertical service shaft 30 meters past your alcove," she said. "It leads to an old access building at street level. It's narrow. It wasn't designed for civilian evacuation." Daniel closed his eyes. "How many people can it take?" "Slowly, 1 at a time. And the rest of the passengers?" A long pause. "We will have to evacuate them the other way," Mira said. "Separately." Daniel felt the shape of the day change again, branching into paths that could not rejoin. "You're asking us to split," he said. "Yes." Another low crack rolled through the tunnel. Closer. Louder. Pavel swore. "She's going." Lila met Daniel's eyes. "The injured won't survive a tunnel collapse." Daniel nodded. "Okay," he said into the phone. "We'll take the shaft." "Daniel," Mira said softly. "You don't have to go up. You can send them." Daniel looked at the injured man, at the narrow darkness ahead, at the phone in his hand, the thin line connecting him to the surface. "No," he said. "I'll stay until they're safe." The city above was fully aware now. News helicopters hovered. Streets were blocked. People stared down at grates in the pavement, suddenly conscious of what lay beneath their feet. And below it all, Daniel helped lift the first injured man to his feet, guiding him toward a ladder that rose into the unknown. The tunnel groaned again. Time was nearly gone. The service shaft looked older than everything else around it. Its concrete edges were rough, chipped by decades of use and neglect. A rusted ladder ran straight up into darkness, disappearing somewhere far above, where a faint circle of gray light suggested the surface. "Okay," Lila said, steady and professional despite the dust streaking her face. "You first," she told the injured man with a broken leg. "Slow, 1 rung at a time." Pavel and Daniel helped brace him, guiding his foot onto the lowest rung. The tunnel groaned again. Not a crack this time. Something deeper. A shifting. Daniel felt it through his boots. "Mira," he whispered. "We don't have much time." "I know," she replied. Her voice was tight now, stripped of command center distance. "The collapse is accelerating. You may feel pressure waves." Pressure waves. As if the earth itself were breathing in. The first man began to climb. Each movement was careful, painful. Lila stayed below, hands hovering, ready to catch him if he slipped. Dust rained down suddenly, thicker than before. "Faster," Pavel urged gently. "But don't rush." Daniel turned his phone light toward the tunnel behind them. The darkness there no longer felt empty. It felt full. A deep boom echoed, short, violent. The tunnel wall behind them cracked open like a wound, a jagged line racing through concrete. Chunks fell, smashing against the rails with explosive sound. "Move!" Daniel shouted. The second injured man, head wound, was already at the ladder. Blood ran into his eyes as he climbed, blinking hard. Lila started up behind him. That left Daniel and Pavel. Another thunderous crack. This one came with wind. A violent rush of air slammed into them as part of the tunnel ceiling collapsed farther down, sending debris cascading toward the train. Daniel staggered, catching himself on the wall. "Daniel," Mira shouted in his ear. "You have to go now." "What about the passengers?" he yelled back. We're evacuating them from the other side, she said. But you cannot help anyone if you're buried. Pavel grabbed Daniel's shoulder. She's right. Daniel hesitated. Then the tunnel screamed. There was no better word for it. A long, tearing sound as concrete and earth gave way, echoing through the underground like the city's spine snapping. Go! Pavel shouted. Daniel climbed. The ladder rattled violently beneath him. Dust blinded him. His hands slipped on rusted metal, scraping skin raw. Below him, Pavel started up. Above, light flickered, someone opening the hatch. Then, a deafening crash. Daniel felt it more than heard it. The shockwave punched the air from his lungs. The ladder shook so hard his teeth snapped together. He climbed blindly, coughing, lungs burning. Almost there, a voice shouted from above. Daniel reached the top just as another section of tunnel collapsed, the roar so loud it erased all other sound. Hands grabbed his arms. They pulled him through the hatch. He rolled on a concrete, gasping, covered in dust and blood that wasn't all his. Below him, the darkness swallowed the ladder. Pavel! Daniel shouted. A hand appeared, then an arm. Then Pavel hauled himself up, face gray but intact. The hatch slammed shut. Silence followed, thick, stunned, unreal. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel laughed. A short, broken sound that surprised him as much as anyone else. Lila was sitting against the wall, head in her hands. The injured men lay nearby, breathing alive. Sirens wailed outside the access building now, close, real. Myra's voice came through again, softer than before. Daniel, she said, you made it. He closed his eyes. So did they. Yes, she said. And because of that, this won't be remembered as a disaster. Daniel leaned his head back against the wall. Through the building's small window, he could see the city. People gathered behind barriers, phones raised, faces tight with concern. The city exhaled. Later, there would be reports. Investigations. Blame carefully distributed. Repairs would be made. Trains would run again. Most people would forget. Daniel knew he wouldn't. As medics reached him, wrapping blankets around his shoulders, he thought again of the envelope on his kitchen table. Maybe he'd open it tonight. Or maybe, for the first time in years, he wouldn't let the past decide what kind of day this had been. By noon, the city had absorbed the shock and adjusted its posture. Traffic maps still glowed red in places. A section of the metro remained closed. News anchors spoke with practiced gravity, standing in front of diagrams they would abandon by tomorrow. The words near miss and avoided catastrophe floated through the air like fragile achievements. Daniel sat on the steps outside the access building, a thermal blanket wrapped around his shoulders despite the mild weather. His hands were clean now, scrubbed by a paramedic, but they still felt like they were vibrating. Across the street, people gathered behind barriers. Some filmed, some just watched. Daniel Kovac? He looked up. A woman in a press badge stood a respectful distance away. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm with Channel 4. Would you be willing to say a few words about what happened underground? Daniel shook his head. No, he said. I don't think so. She nodded immediately, relief flickering across her face. Of course. Thank you. She walked away without pressing. Daniel appreciated that more than he could articulate. A few meters away, the passengers from Train 6 were being guided toward buses. Some looked shaken. Some looked angry. Some hugged strangers like they'd known them for years. The woman with the child spotted Daniel. She hesitated, then crossed the distance. My son, she said quietly, the boy half asleep against her shoulder. He wanted to say thank you. Daniel smiled, unsure what to do with his hands. You were very brave, the woman added. Daniel almost corrected her. I was afraid, he wanted to say. I still am. But instead he nodded. You were too, he said. She smiled and rejoined the others. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text message from Mira. Command wants to formally commend you. I told them you might refuse. He typed back. You told them right. A pause. For what it's worth, she wrote, you made the right call today. Daniel stared at the message. 3 years ago, someone had said almost the same thing in a hearing room filled with microphones and lawyers. It hadn't helped then, but today it felt different, because today he'd stayed. He'd chosen people over procedure. Action over safety disguised as distance. He typed one last message. "Thank you for trusting me." The reply came quickly. "Thank you for listening." That evening, Daniel unlocked his apartment door at 7:42 p.m. The apartment looked exactly as he'd left it. The mug in the sink, the chair pulled out, the quiet hum of appliances doing their uncelebrated work. The envelope still lay on the table. He picked it up, opened it, read it. Then, carefully, he folded the paper and placed it back inside. Not because it no longer mattered, but because it no longer owned him. Later, his sister arrived with takeout and too many questions. They ate on the couch. He told her the story in fragments, leaving out the parts that didn't yet have words. That night, as the city slept, maintenance crews worked beneath it, reinforcing walls, sealing cracks, promising stability. The city would move again. So would Daniel. Not loudly, not heroically, but with the quiet knowledge that on one ordinary morning, on a day that could have been forgotten, he had stood in the dark, listened, and chosen to step forward. And sometimes that was enough to change the shape of a life.